A thrilling story of redemption, love, passion, and new beginnings. She walked into the wrong room and saw the new CEO completely naked. What seemed like an embarrassment turned into a scandal that unearthed a secret buried for more than 20 years. And when the past returned, it didn't come alone. Watch this story until the end, you'll be surprised. If you like love stories, romance, subscribe to this channel, leave your comment. We post videos like this every day. Continuing. The fine March rain tapped against the windows of the 12th floor of Parker Engineering, creating a hypnotic rhythm that echoed through the empty corridors. Sarah Mitchell adjusted her reading glasses and sighed, looking at the clock in the corner of her computer screen. 7:40 in the evening. Once again, she would be the last to leave. Not that it bothered her, in fact she preferred it this way. The silent corridors, the empty rooms, just the low hum of the air conditioning and the distant echo of her heels on the marble floor. It was in these moments that she truly felt in control, owner of her own time and space. During the day, the Arthur company buzzed with hurried executives, phones ringing incessantly and endless meetings. But at night, everything was hers. Sarah had learned to value these small territories of peace. At 42, after a marriage that collapsed like a house of cards and years devoted entirely to her daughter Emily, who struggled with increasingly frequent anxiety attacks, she had built a routine that worked as a protective shield. Work, home, daughter, work. No surprises, no shocks, no disappointments. As the administrative manager of Parker Engineering, one of the most traditional construction companies in Boston, Sarah knew every protocol, every procedure, every important name that circulated through the corridors. She knew exactly when to smile politely, when to lower her head, and when to make herself invisible. There was an art to it, she thought, in being competent without being threatening, present without being noticed. The company was going through a turbulent period since the sudden death of Frank Parker, the founding patriarch. The suicide had shaken not only the family, but the entire real estate market in Massachusetts. Frank was a legend, a man who had built an empire from nothing and whose word was worth more than any signed contract. His departure left a void that seemed impossible to fill. For months, the company ran on autopilot, with vice presidents dividing responsibilities and making cautious decisions. Until the news came. Ethan Parker, the eldest son, was returning from London to take over the presidency. Sarah vaguely remembered him from the time when she was just a junior assistant years ago. A serious young man, of few words, who always seemed to be passing through. Then he had left to study engineering abroad and rarely returned to the United States. Now, at 36, he was returning as the new commander of an empire in crisis. Sarah organized the last documents on the desk, stored the financial reports in the file, and turned off the computer. She was ready to leave when she remembered the memo that had arrived late in the afternoon. An urgent request for updated schedules for tomorrow morning's meeting. The documents were in Frank's room, which would now be Ethan's. She hesitated for a moment. The presidential suite had remained locked since the patriarch's death, like an untouched sanctuary. But the executive secretary had given her the key earlier, explaining that she needed to fetch some files. She went up 2 floors to the 14th, where the presidential suite was located. The corridor was bathed in a welcoming dimness, illuminated only by emergency lights. Sarah walked slowly, her heels echoing louder in the absolute silence. She stopped in front of the solid wooden door with the golden plaque, President. She took a deep breath and inserted the key. The room was exactly as she remembered, imposing with a panoramic view of the city, dark wooden furniture, and an atmosphere that inspired both respect and intimidation. Frank had decorated that space as a reflection of his personality, solid, traditional, unquestionable. Sarah walked to the file cabinet, located the folder she was looking for, and was about to leave when she heard the sound of running water coming from the private bathroom. Her heart raced. Someone was there. How was that possible? The room should be empty, locked. Maybe it was the cleaning staff, although it was strange for them to be working so late. Or maybe it was Daniel, Frank's youngest son, who had temporarily assumed some administrative functions. She should leave immediately, but curiosity spoke louder. She walked towards the sound, planning to identify herself and explain her presence there. That's when she made the mistake. That would change everything. Instead of knocking on the bathroom door, she directly opened the door. She thought was the exit from the presidential suite, but it was the wrong door. It was the door to the closet adjacent to the private bathroom, and it was as if time stopped. Ethan Parker had his back to her, completely naked, just getting out of the shower. Drops of water still ran down his broad shoulders and defined back, marked by some thin scars that seemed to tell silent stories. His dark hair was wet, stuck to his neck, and steam rose gently around him like an ethereal aura. Sarah held her breath, paralyzed. She knew she should immediately back away, close the door, apologize, disappear. But something kept her immobile, as if her feet were glued to the floor. Maybe it was shock. Maybe it was something more primitive, a reaction she had forgotten still existed within her. That's when he turned around. Slowly, unhurried, as if he already knew she was there, as if he had been expecting her. Ethan's eyes found hers and didn't look away. They were eyes of a deep amber like burnt honey, with an intensity that seemed to pierce her skin and touch something very deep inside her. He showed no surprise, didn't cover himself, didn't shout. He just looked at her, and in that look there was something she couldn't decipher. Recognition, curiosity, desire. His body was that of a man who knew his own power, muscles defined without exaggeration, a posture that radiated confidence even in the vulnerability of nakedness. But there was something more, an almost palpable melancholy, as if he carried an invisible weight on his shoulders. Sarah noticed this, even through the shock and confusion that dominated her. For an eternal second, they looked at each other without words. The air between them seemed to become denser, charged with a strange electricity. Sarah felt her face heat up, her heart beating so hard she was sure he could hear it. Her hands trembled imperceptibly. Finally, reason won over the trance. "Sorry," she murmured, her voice coming out hoarse and low. "I didn't know. Sorry." She quickly backed away, closed the door more forcefully than she intended, and left. The presidential suite almost running. Her hands were shaking so much that it took a few seconds to manage to lock the door again. Her heart was beating so erratically that she had to lean against the wall for a moment, trying to regain control. What had just happened? How had she been so careless? And why, instead of feeling just embarrassment, was there something else burning in her chest? A restlessness she couldn't name, a heat that refused to disappear. Sarah took the elevator down to the ground floor, in absolute silence, staring at her reflection in the metal doors. Her eyes were too bright, her cheeks too flushed. She looked like a teenager who had just been kissed for the first time. She laughed softly at herself. How ridiculous. At 42, reacting like an inexperienced girl for having seen a naked man, even if it was that man. She left the building in the fine rain that continued to fall, breathing in the humid night air. The parking lot was almost empty, just a few solitary cars under the yellowish illumination of the lampposts. She walked to her silver Civic, a sensible purchase she had made 3 years ago, and got into the car, still feeling weak in the knees. During the drive to her home in the Castle Hill neighborhood, she tried to rationalize what had happened. It was a misunderstanding, nothing more. An embarrassing situation that would be forgotten in a few days, as long as she maintained professional composure. Ethan Parker probably didn't even remember who she was. To him, she would be just a clumsy employee who accidentally invaded his privacy. But even trying to minimize the incident, she couldn't get out of her mind the image of those amber eyes staring at her with a disturbing intensity. There was something in that look that affected her in a way she hadn't experienced in years. Since the divorce, she had closed herself off to any romantic possibility. She had concentrated all her energy on being a good mother to Emily and a competent professional. Physical desire was something she had learned to ignore, to bury beneath layers of responsibilities and routines. Now, driving through the wet streets of Boston, she felt as if something had awakened inside her. Something she preferred to keep dormant. She arrived home around 9 in the evening. The house was small but cozy, a townhouse in a gated community that she had bought with great sacrifice after the separation. Emily was in her room, probably studying or browsing the internet. At 17, her daughter was in her senior year of high school and faced constant pressure that often transformed into anxiety attacks. Sarah had learned to read the signs, the prolonged silences, the refused meals, the sleepless nights. "Honey, I'm home," she announced, hanging her purse. On the hook by the entrance. "Hi, Mom," came the muffled response from upstairs. Sarah went up to check on her daughter. Emily was lying on the bed, surrounded by books and notebooks, her laptop open beside her. She had her mother's brown hair, but her eyes were green like her father's. She was a beautiful, intelligent girl, but emotionally fragile. "How was today?" asked Sarah, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Normal," Emily replied without raising her eyes from her books. "School was okay. I took the chemistry test." "And how did you do?" "I think well." Emily finally looked at her mother. "Mom, you're acting strange. Did something happen?" Sarah was surprised. Even with all her emotional problems, Emily had a keen perception for detecting changes in the mood of those around her. "No, honey. Just tired. It was a long day at work." Emily studied her for a few more seconds as if she could read minds but didn't insist. "I'm going to make a snack. Do you want anything?" offered Sarah. "No, thank you. I've already had dinner." She went down to the kitchen and prepared a simple sandwich, but discovered she wasn't hungry. She sat at the small dining room table, looking out the window at the garden illuminated by the community's lampposts. The rain had stopped, but the air was still humid and heavy. She tried to focus on the next day's tasks, the scheduled meetings, the pending reports. But her mind insisted on returning to those few seconds in the presidential suite. The way Ethan had looked at her, without embarrassment, as if he had known her for a long time. The feeling that there was something familiar in those features, in those eyes. Sarah shook her head, annoyed with herself. She was fantasizing, creating connections where none existed. Ethan Parker was the president of the company where she worked, nothing more. A powerful rich man, probably used to causing this kind of reaction in women. She wasn't special. She was just another employee who made an embarrassing mistake. She decided to take a shower and go to bed early. The next day, she would return to her normal routine, maintain a professional posture and forget the episode. Simple as that. But when she closed her eyes on the pillow, her last thoughts before falling asleep were about those amber eyes and the disturbing feeling that her life had just taken a completely new direction. The next morning, Sarah woke up, earlier than usual, with a strange feeling of anticipation mixed with anxiety. She prepared breakfast for Emily, who came down sleepy and complaining of a headache. "Did you take your anxiety medication yesterday?" asked Sarah, observing her daughter's swollen eyes. "I did, Mom. Don't worry so much." But Sarah always worried. Since Emily had started having panic attacks in her freshman year of high school, she lived in constant alert. Her ex-husband, Robert, blamed Sarah's overprotection for their daughter's problems, but she knew it was more complex than that. Emily was too sensitive for an increasingly competitive and cruel world. She dropped her daughter off at school and headed to work, driving in the heavy morning traffic. As she approached the Parker Engineering building, she felt her stomach contracting. What if she encountered Ethan in the hallways? How would she react? How would he react? She arrived at the office at 8 o'clock sharp, as always. The morning routine followed the usual pattern. Check emails, organize the agenda, prepare reports. But there was an underlying tension, an expectation that left her hyper-vigilant to every sound of footsteps in the corridor, every door opening. "It's he." Was around 10 in the morning when she received an internal email that made her heart race. Sender, Ethan Parker. Subject, meeting. Message: Ms. Mitchell, I need to speak with you about administrative procedures. Could you come to my office at 2 p.m. Thank you. Sarah read the message 3 times, looking between the lines for any indication that he was referring to the incident from the night before, but the tone was purely professional, formal, as it would be with any employee. Maybe it really was just about work. Maybe he didn't even remember her properly. She responded, confirming the meeting, and spent the rest of the morning in a state of growing nervousness. She ate little for lunch, checked her appearance in the women's bathroom mirror more times than she would admit, changed her lipstick twice. At 2 o'clock sharp, she was standing in front of the door of the presidential suite, the folder with documents in her trembling hands. She took a deep breath and knocked. "Come in," came the deep voice from the other side. Sarah pushed the door and entered the room that had now been transformed. Frank's furniture was still there, but there were new elements: a modern laptop on the desk, some stacked books, a still steaming cup of coffee, and there, behind the imposing mahogany desk, was Ethan Parker. During the day, dressed in an impeccable navy blue suit, he radiated a natural authority. His dark hair was perfectly combed. His well-trimmed beard highlighted the strong line of his jaw. But it was his eyes that hit her again like a punch to the stomach, those same amber eyes that had stared at her the night before. "Ms. Mitchell, thank you for coming. Please sit down." The voice was polite, controlled, but there was something beneath the professional tone, an undercurrent that she couldn't identify. Sarah sat in the chair in front of the desk, crossed her legs, and opened the folder. "I brought the reports you requested," she said, surprised by how firm her own voice sounded. Ethan nodded but didn't immediately take the documents. Instead, he studied her with that penetrating gaze that seemed to see beyond the surface. "How long have you been working here?" he asked. 12 years, answered Sarah. "I started as an assistant and was promoted to administrative manager 5 years ago. My father mentioned you frequently. He said you were one of the most reliable employees in the company." Sarah felt a warmth rise up her neck. Frank Parker talked about her? How was that possible if they barely exchanged words beyond professional formalities? "I'm grateful for the trust they've always placed in me," she said, maintaining a neutral tone. Ethan rose from his chair and walked to the window, standing with his back to her. It was a movement that might have seemed casual, but Sarah noticed the tension in his shoulders, the rigidity in his posture. "Ms. Mitchell," he said, still looking at the city below, "about last night." Sarah's stomach dropped, so he was going to address the issue. She prepared herself for the embarrassment, for the formal apology, perhaps even for a warning. "I want you to know that I understand it was a misunderstanding," Ethan continued, turning to face her again. "For there's no need for embarrassment between us. I apologize for what happened, Mr. Parker. It was my mistake. I shouldn't have—" "No," he interrupted, raising his hand. "There's no fault on your part. The situation was unexpected for both of us." There was something in the way he said "unexpected" that made Sarah raise her eyes to look at him directly, and that's when she saw it. For a fraction of a second, the professional mask slipped, and she glimpsed something raw, vulnerable, almost desperate in those amber eyes. "Mr. Parker," she began, not knowing exactly what she was going to say. "Ethan," he corrected gently. "I think after last night we can dispense with some formalities." The name left his lips like a caress, and Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine. Something was happening there, something that went far beyond a professional clarification conversation. The atmosphere in the room was charged with an electric tension that seemed to grow with each second of silence. Ethan returned to behind the desk, but didn't sit down. He stood, his hands resting on the furniture, leaning slightly towards her. "Sarah," he said, and her name sounded different in his voice. More intimate, more personal. "May I call you Sarah?" She nodded, not trusting her own voice. "Sarah, I need to ask you a question, and I'd like you to be honest with me." Her heart accelerated. "Of course. Have you ever heard my father mention any situation from the past? Any story involving a woman named Sarah?" The world stopped. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face, her hands turn cold. How could he know? What had Frank told him? And why did that name, that question, reach her after so many years? I don't understand," she murmured, though she understood perfectly. Ethan observed her with redoubled intensity, as if he could read the thoughts she was desperately trying to hide. "My father left some documents, diaries. In them, he mentions a woman who meant a lot to him in the 90s, a woman named Sarah." He paused, his eyes fixed on hers. The coincidence of names is interesting. Sarah stood up abruptly, the folder falling to the floor and scattering papers across the Persian rug. "I need to go," she said, her voice coming out higher than intended. "I have other commitments." But when she bent down to collect the documents, Ethan came around the desk and knelt beside her, helping to gather the papers. For a moment, their hands touched as they reached for the same document, and it was as if an electric current passed between them. Both stopped moving. Kneeling on the floor of the presidential suite, surrounded by scattered papers, they looked at each other in a way that left no doubt about what was happening. It wasn't just professional curiosity. It wasn't just an embarrassing misunderstanding. It was something much more dangerous, much more complex. "Sarah," Ethan murmured, and this time her name sounded like a confession. She stood up quickly, leaving the papers on the floor, and practically ran to the door. "I really need to go," she repeated without looking back. "Sarah, wait." But she had already left, closing the door behind her with unnecessary force. She practically flew through the corridors to the elevator, her heart beating so hard she felt as if it would explode inside her chest. When the elevator doors closed, she finally allowed the tears she had been holding back to come forth. They weren't tears of sadness, but of fear. Fear that the past she had buried so deeply was coming back to haunt her. Fear that the feelings she had learned to control so rigorously were escaping her control. And mainly, fear that that amber-eyed man could awaken in her things she preferred to keep dormant forever. Because now she was certain, Ethan Parker wasn't just the president of the company where she worked. He was connected to her past in a way she didn't yet fully understand, but that promised to turn her life upside down in ways she wasn't prepared to face. The days that followed passed like a dense and suffocating fog. Sarah immersed herself in work with an almost desperate intensity, arriving earlier, leaving later, accepting extra tasks she would normally delegate, anything to avoid casual encounters in the corridors, to keep her mind too busy to wander about amber eyes and dangerous questions about the past. But Ethan Parker seemed to be everywhere. Not in an obvious or intrusive way. It was more subtle than that. A prolonged look during general meetings, a presence she felt even when he wasn't physically in the same environment, professional emails that arrived at strange hours, as if he too was working beyond normal business hours. There was something in the way he conducted the company's activities that suggested a restless mind, someone who used work as an escape from internal ghosts. On Thursday of the following week, Sarah was organizing documents in the Central Archive when Daniel Parker appeared at the door. Frank's youngest son was physically different from his older brother. Blonde hair, light blue eyes, an easy smile that contrasted with Ethan's perpetual seriousness. At 32, Daniel had a more conventional beauty, the type of man who attracted attention at parties and always had a kind word for everyone. "Sarah, good to find you," he said, leaning on the doorframe with a studied casualness. "I've been looking for you." "Hi, Daniel, how can I help?" She maintained a professional but friendly tone. She had always liked Daniel, who was more accessible than his father, and now, apparently, warmer than his brother. "Actually, I wanted to talk about some changes happening in the company. You know how it is with Ethan taking over the presidency. A lot is being re-evaluated." There was something in the way he said re-evaluated that made Sarah stop organizing the documents and pay full attention. What kind of changes? Daniel entered the room and closed the door behind him, a gesture that immediately made Sarah uncomfortable. The archive was small, and with the door closed, the space seemed even more claustrophobic. "Ethan is very interested in the company's old files, mainly from the 90s, project documents, contracts, my father's personal correspondence." Daniel approached, standing just a few meters away. "He's reviewing everything with an obsession that frankly worries me." "It's natural that he wants to better understand the family business," Sarah responded, trying to sound neutral. "Is it?" Daniel tilted his head, studying her carefully. "Or is he looking for something specific?" Sarah's heart accelerated, but she maintained a serene expression. "I wouldn't know. You should talk directly with him about that." Ah, but Ethan isn't very talkative, don't you think? Daniel smiled, but there was something cold in that smile. He's always been like that. Closed, secretive. Even when we were children, there was always something he hid from the rest of the family. Sarah began to move toward the door, but Daniel subtly blocked the way. Sarah, can I be frank with you? We've known each other for years. We've always had a good professional relationship. You're one of the people I trust most in this company. Thank you, Daniel. I also have a lot of respect for your work. So as friends, I need to alert you about something. He lowered his voice as if sharing a secret. Ethan is not well. Our father's death affected him in ways he doesn't admit. He's obsessed with things from the past. He's rummaging through personal diaries, asking strange questions, connecting dots that perhaps shouldn't be connected. Sarah's mouth went dry. What kind of questions? About women our father knew, old relationships. There's a specific story that seems to have captured his imagination in a concerning way. The silence stretched between them, loaded with dangerous subtexts. Sarah felt as if she was walking on thin ice, where any misstep could make her sink into frozen waters. Why are you telling me this? She finally asked. Because your name appeared in these investigations of his. Daniel dropped the bomb with calculated tranquility. And I wouldn't want you to be harmed by obsessions that have nothing to do with you. Sarah felt the world spin slightly around her. My name? Don't worry. Daniel moved closer, placing a comforting hand on her arm. I know you have nothing to do with the past fantasies that are tormenting my brother. But Ethan is vulnerable at the moment, and vulnerable men sometimes make questionable choices. His hand on her arm was too warm, remained there too long. When she moved away, Daniel didn't seem offended, just amused. Sarah, if you ever feel uncomfortable with the attention Ethan is giving you, know that you can count on me. I'm here to protect the employees of this company, especially those I value personally. There was something in the way he said value personally that made Sarah's stomach turn. It wasn't romantic desire. It was something more calculated, more possessive. I need to get back to work, she said, moving decisively toward the door. Of course, but Sarah? She stopped with her hand on the doorknob. If Ethan tries to involve you in anything strange, any conversation about the past, any situation that makes you uncomfortable, come to me immediately. Promise? I promise, she lied, just to be able to leave. When she finally managed to leave the archive, Sarah ran to the women's bathroom and locked herself in a stall. Her hands were shaking so much that it took a few minutes to regain control. The conversation with Daniel had confirmed her worst fears. Ethan really was investigating the past, and her name was somehow connected to this investigation. Even more disturbing was realizing that Daniel also knew something. The way he spoke, the insinuations, the warnings disguised as protection, all of this suggested that he knew more about the situation than he was revealing. And there was something in the way he looked at her, how he touched her arm, that made her feel like prey being studied by a patient predator. That night, Sarah arrived home later than usual, her mind buzzing with concerns. Emily was in the kitchen preparing a sandwich when she entered. "Mom, are you okay? You look pale," said her daughter, raising her eyes from the plate. "Just tired, love. How was your day?" "Normal, but—" Emily hesitated, biting her lower lip in a way that Sarah recognized as a sign of anxiety. "Something strange happened today." Sarah's stomach contracted. "What was it?" "There was a man in the school parking lot when I left. He was leaning against a black car, very elegant, and when he saw me, he waved, as if he knew me." "Waved how?" "Like this." Emily imitated a casual, friendly wave. "And he smiled. A nice smile, you know. Blonde hair, light eyes, he looked important." Sarah's blood froze. The description could be of several people, but something in her maternal instinct alerted her that it wasn't a coincidence. "You've never seen this man before?" "No, but—" Emily frowned, thoughtful. "There was something familiar about him. As if, I don't know, as if I should know him from somewhere." Sarah tried to keep her voice calm. "And what did you do?" Nothing. I just looked at him for a second and then left. But when I looked back, he was still watching me. Emily, listen carefully to what I'm going to say. Sarah held her daughter's hands, forcing her to pay attention. If you see this man again, or any stranger who tries to approach you, tell me immediately. And don't go anywhere alone for a few days, okay? Mom, you're scaring me. What's happening? Probably nothing, love. I'm just being cautious. Sarah kissed her daughter's forehead. But promise you'll let me know if you see this man again. I promise. But Mom. Yes? You've been acting very strange lately, since last week. Is there something at work that's worrying you? Sarah sighed. Emily was always too perceptive for her own tranquility. Just some changes at the company. Nothing you need to worry about. But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't true. Whatever was happening was already spreading, beyond the walls of Parker Engineering. And now Emily, her vulnerable and anxious daughter, was potentially involved. That night Sarah could barely sleep. She lay in bed, listening to the night sounds of the community, thinking about Daniel in the parking lot of Emily's school. Because she was sure it was him. The description matched perfectly, and the coincidence would be too great. But why was he watching her daughter? What did he want? And why did she feel as if she was being surrounded by forces she didn't completely understand? On Friday morning, Sarah arrived at work, determined to keep her distance from both Ethan and Daniel. She planned to spend the entire day in meetings with suppliers and then leave early to personally pick up Emily from school. A simple and safe plan. But at 10 in the morning, she received a call from the executive secretary. Sarah, I need you to come up to the conference room on the 14th floor. There's a project presentation, and your presence was specifically requested. By whom? By Mr. Ethan Parker. Sarah closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and went up to the 14th floor. The conference room was spacious, with an oval glass table and a panoramic view of the city. When she entered, there were about 10 people present, executives, engineers, external consultants, and leading the presentation, Ethan. He wore a charcoal, grey suit that enhanced his amber eyes, and when he saw her enter, he made an almost imperceptible pause before continuing to speak. Sarah sat in the chair farthest away possible, trying to become invisible among the other participants. The presentation was about a new residential project in the Beacon Hill area, a luxury development that would be the company's largest launch in 5 years. Ethan spoke with authority and passion about sustainability, architectural innovation, and social impact. It was impossible not to be impressed by his technical knowledge and strategic vision. During a pause for questions, his eyes found hers across the table. It was just a second, but Sarah felt as if he was communicating directly with her, ignoring all the other people in the room. Are there any administrative considerations we should address, Ms. Mitchell? He asked, directing the attention of the entire room to her. Sarah straightened in her chair, aware that everyone was watching her. The financial timelines seem aggressive, considering the necessary approvals from the city. Perhaps we should include a safety margin of at least 2 months. Excellent observation, Ethan replied, and there was genuine approval in his voice. It's exactly this kind of strategic thinking that makes the difference between a successful project and a financial disaster. The public compliment made Sarah blush, and she noticed some curious glances from the other executives. It wasn't common for the president to praise mid-level employees so openly. After the meeting, as everyone was leaving the room, Ethan approached her. Sarah, could you stay a few minutes? There are some administrative details I'd like to discuss. She wanted to refuse, create an excuse, flee. But there were other people present, and it would be too strange to deny a professional request from the president. When they were alone in the conference room, Ethan closed the door and turned to face her. This time, there was no pretense of professional formality. How are you? He asked, and the question sounded intensely personal. Fine, she lied. Why do you ask? Because you seem tense, frightened. He took a few steps closer. And because my brother told me he spoke with you yesterday. Sarah's heart raced. It was a work conversation. Was it? Ethan tilted his head, studying her. He mentioned that he warned you about my obsession with the past. I didn't... Sarah. The way he said her name made her stop talking. I need you to understand something. My brother isn't trying to protect you. He's trying to protect himself. From what? From truths that could destroy the image he has. Built of himself. Ethan walked to the window, looking at the city below. You know, for years I thought I knew my family. I thought I knew who my father was, who my brother was, what my place in the world was. But when you come back after years away and start looking at things with adult eyes, he turned to face her again. Sometimes you discover that nothing was what it seemed. Ethan, I don't know what you want from me, said Sarah, her voice coming out more vulnerable than she intended. But whatever it is, I can't help. I have a daughter, a simple life, and I don't want to get involved in whatever this is. And if you're already involved... The question hung in the air between them like a veiled threat. What do you mean? Instead of answering directly, Ethan walked to a folder on the conference table and removed an old photograph. He extended it to Sarah. Do you recognize this photo? With trembling hands, Sarah took the photograph. It was a black and white image, clearly from the 90s, showing a middle-aged man at a formal event. He was smiling at the camera, one arm around a young woman who was partially out of the frame. Only her profile was visible, but there was something familiar. Where did you get this? She whispered. In my father's private office. It was hidden in a secret compartment of his desk along with other photos and documents. Sarah studied the image more carefully, and her stomach dropped. The man in the photo was definitely Frank Parker, but decades younger, and the woman, Ethan, I can't... The back, he said softly. Sarah turned the photograph over. In Frank's elegant handwriting, it was written, with Taos, Washington, D.C., 1998. The day everything changed. Her hands trembled so much she almost dropped the photo. Sarah, Ethan approached, his voice low and intense. My father wrote about you, pages and pages in his diaries, about a young woman who worked on a company project in Washington, D.C., a woman he loved more than he admitted to himself, a woman who disappeared from his life in a way that tormented him until the day of his death. Stop, she whispered. A woman who became pregnant. The photograph fell from Sarah's hands and floated to the floor like a dead leaf. She leaned on the table, feeling as if the world was spinning around her. How did you... He wrote about the pregnancy, about the family pressures, about decisions that needed to be made. Ethan bent down to pick up the photograph, but his eyes remained fixed on hers, about a baby that was removed from the situation. My son didn't die, came out of her like a strangled whisper. Is that what you discovered? Ethan nodded slowly. Sarah, I need you to understand. I didn't know any of this when I returned to the States. I didn't know you existed. I didn't know about the pregnancy. I didn't know about the decisions that were made without your knowledge or consent. Where is he? Her voice was breaking. Where is my son? I don't know. But I have some clues, and with your help I can find out. Sarah straightened up, wiping her eyes with the backs of her hands. Why would you do this? Why would you help me? Ethan hesitated for a moment, as if struggling with something internal. Then, with brutal honesty, he said, because from the moment you walked into my room that night, from the moment our eyes met, I knew there was something between us, something that goes beyond coincidence or chance. He moved closer, and because after reading my father's diaries, after seeing how he tormented himself for not having fought for you, I'm not going to make the same mistake. What mistake? Letting you go without fighting. The silence that followed was charged with an intensity that made the air in the room seem denser. Sarah looked at him as if seeing him for the first time, this man who had entered her life like a hurricane, bringing with him revelations that threatened to destroy everything she thought she knew about her past. Ethan, this is madness. You don't even know me. That's not true, he extended his hand, delicately touching her face. I've read every word my father wrote about you. I know you're stubborn and brave. I know you sacrificed your dreams to care for your daughter. I know you're afraid to trust. But when you do trust, it's with your whole heart. I know you carry scars that no one else can see. Tears returned to her eyes. You don't understand. This can't happen. I work for you. You are... I'm the man who can't stop thinking about you since that night, he interrupted. I'm the man who wants to help you find the truth, no matter where it leads us. And if the truth is too terrible, then we'll face it together. For a moment, Sarah allowed herself to imagine what it would be like, to accept his help, to discover what really happened to her son, perhaps even to allow the feelings bubbling inside her to surface. But then, reality hit her like a bucket of cold water. Ethan, you don't understand the implications of what you're suggesting. If someone discovers that we're investigating together, that we have any kind of personal relationship, it will destroy your career and mine. Not to mention what it could do to Emily. Emily? My daughter. She already has anxiety problems. And if this situation becomes a public scandal, I won't let that happen, said Ethan with a conviction that surprised her. Sarah, trust me. We can be discreet. We can investigate without drawing attention. And when we discover the truth, we'll make the right decisions. Sarah studied him for a long moment. There was sincerity in his eyes, but there was also fire. This man was dangerous in a way she wasn't prepared to face. Dangerous because he made her want to believe in possibilities she had buried a long time ago. I need to think, she finally said. Of course, but Sarah. She stopped at the door. Be careful with my brother. He's not who he appears to be. What do you mean? Daniel has always been jealous of me. He always believed I was the favorite son, that I received all the opportunities that were denied to him. If he discovers that I'm investigating the past, that you're involved in this, he'll try to use it against us. Do you think he already suspects? I'm sure of it, and that's why we need to be even more careful. Sarah nodded and left the room, but as she walked through the company's corridors, she felt as if she was entering enemy territory. Every colleague she greeted, every executive who passed by, seemed to observe her with renewed curiosity. Either it was paranoia or the situation was already becoming more visible than would be safe. At lunchtime, instead of eating at the company, she went out to walk around the city. She needed fresh air, space to think. She walked through the busy streets of downtown Boston, trying to process everything she had discovered. Her son was alive. Somewhere there was a young man who was blood of her blood, who grew up without knowing he had a mother who never stopped dreaming of him. The pain she had carried for more than 2 decades, the guilt of having lost the baby, the feeling that she had failed as a mother before even having the chance to be one, all of this had been based on a lie. And Ethan represented both a promise and a threat, promise of answers, of justice, perhaps even of something deeper and more frightening. A threat because getting involved with him would mean risking everything she had built, all the stability she had achieved for herself and for Emily. When she returned to the office, there was a bouquet of flowers on her desk. White flowers, elegant without a card. Sarah looked around, seeking some explanation, but no one seemed to know where they had come from. Someone has a secret admirer, commented a colleague, passing by her desk with a mischievous smile. But Sarah didn't. Find it funny. Anonymous flowers at her workplace were another sign that her private life was becoming too public, and there were 2 people who could have sent them, Ethan or Daniel. She took the flowers and threw them in the trash. In the afternoon, she received a text message from a number she didn't recognize. Some truths are too dangerous to be discovered. Think carefully before opening doors that may be impossible to close. Sarah looked at the message for a long time, then deleted it. But the veiled threat had been clear. Someone was watching. Someone knew about her conversation with Ethan, and someone wanted to scare her. The question was who, and more importantly, how far was she willing to go to discover the truth about her son, even knowing that each step took her deeper into dangerous territory from which she might not be able to escape unharmed. The weekend passed like an agonizing eternity. Sarah tried to maintain a normal routine with Emily, breakfast together, shopping at the supermarket, a movie session in the afternoon, but her mind was constantly divided between Ethan's revelations and the threatening message she had received. Every car that passed more slowly down the street, every person who looked for too long, every phone that rang and stopped before she answered, everything became a reason for paranoia. Emily noticed, of course. During Sunday dinner, while absent-mindedly poking at the lasagna plate that Sarah had prepared, she said, "Mom, are you going to tell me what's really happening, or are we going to keep pretending everything's normal?" Sarah raised her eyes from her own plate, which she had also barely touched. "What are you talking about, honey? You haven't been sleeping properly for days. You checked the windows in the middle of the night. Yes, I hear you walking around the house. When we're on the street, you keep looking back as if someone is following us, and yesterday you locked the car door 3 times. Her daughter's keen perception always surprised and frightened Sarah in equal measure. Emily might be anxious and fragile in many aspects, but when it came to reading the emotions of people around her, she was relentlessly accurate. "I'm just going through a stressful period at work," said Sarah, trying to sound convincing. "Is it because of that man in the school parking lot?" "Partly." Emily put down her fork and leaned towards her mother. "Mom, you know you can trust me, right? I'm not a child anymore. If there's something dangerous happening, I'd rather know than imagine." Sarah studied her daughter's face, the serious green eyes, the expression too mature for a 17-year-old. Emily had grown up watching her mother face the difficult divorce, financial difficulties, nights of extra work. She knew what struggle was, what sacrifice was. Perhaps she deserved more honesty. "There are some complicated situations at work," admitted Sarah. "Changes in the company that might affect me. I'm being cautious because I don't know how things will develop." "Could you lose your job?" "It's possible." Emily nodded, processing the information with a serenity that broke Sarah's heart. Her daughter had learned too early that life was uncertain, that stability was something fragile that could disappear overnight. "If you lose your job, we'll manage," said Emily, with a determination that sounded strange in her young voice. "I can work part-time, help with the bills?" "No," Sarah said firmly. "You're going to focus on your studies and getting into a good college. That's my responsibility, not yours." "Mom, Emily promised me something. If anyone at all, that tries to approach you, asks questions about me or about our family, you tell me immediately. And don't go anywhere alone for the next few days." "You're scaring me." "I'm just being careful." But that night, after Emily went to sleep, Sarah locked herself. In the makeshift office she had set up in the guest room and opened her laptop. If she was going to investigate the past, if she was going to look for her son, she needed to be smart about it. She couldn't depend only on Ethan and his discoveries. She needed her own answers. She started by searching birth records from 1998 in Washington, D.C. Then she moved on to adoption websites, orphanages, charity institutions that dealt with children. Each search led her to dead ends or to information that required documentation she didn't have. After 3 hours of frustrating research, she realized she would need professional help or someone with access to records that were beyond her reach. On Monday morning, Sarah arrived at the office determined to avoid any unnecessary encounter with Ethan or Daniel. She planned to keep her head down, focus on work, maybe even start looking for opportunities at other companies. But at 9:30 in the morning, she received an internal call. "Sarah, this is Mark from security. There's a person here at reception asking for you. Says it's about an urgent personal matter." Her stomach dropped. "Who is it?" "A woman. Identified herself as Dr. Rebecca Silver, attorney. Said she has important information about your family." Sarah closed her eyes, feeling as if the world was crumbling around her. Who else knew about her situation? How many people were involved in this story? "You can ask her to come up, please." 10 minutes later, an elegant woman in her 50s entered her office. Grey hair tied in an impeccable bun, well-tailored black suit, expensive leather briefcase. There was something in her posture that screamed competence and determination. "Ms. Mitchell, thank you for receiving me. I'm Dr. Rebecca Silver. She extended a business card. I'm an attorney specializing in family law and adoption. How can I help you? Actually, I'm the one who can help you. I was hired by someone who prefers to remain anonymous to provide certain information about your family situation. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. What family situation? Dr. Silva sat down without being invited and opened her briefcase. About your son, born on September 28, 1998, in Washington, D.C. The world stopped. Sarah clutched the edge of the desk to keep from fainting. How do you... My client has access to information that was hidden a long time ago. Information about the adoption process that was conducted without your knowledge or consent. Where is he? Sarah's voice came out as a desperate whisper. Before I answer that, I need you to understand some things. Dr. Silva removed a folder from her briefcase. What happened to you in 1998 was technically an illegal adoption. You were led to believe that the baby had died, when in fact he was given to a family through unofficial channels. Why? Why did they do this to me? Because you were young, single, and involved with a married, powerful man. His family considered it would be better for everyone involved if the child was raised away from this situation. Sarah stood up, abruptly, starting to pace back and forth in her small office. They had no right. He was my son. I completely agree, and that's why my client wants to help you. Who is your client? Dr. Silva hesitated. I can't reveal that now, but I can say it's someone who recently discovered this situation and was horrified by the injustice that was committed. Ethan. It had to be Ethan. But why wasn't he speaking with her directly? Why use an intermediary? What can you tell me about my son? He was adopted by an upper-middle-class family in New York. He grew up in good conditions, studied at private schools, graduated in architecture from NYU. Today he's 25 years old and works at a renowned architecture firm. Tears began to stream down Sarah's face. Her baby had become a man. He had a profession, a life, an identity completely separate from her. Does he know he was adopted? Yes. The adoptive parents were always honest about that, but he never knew the real details about how the adoption happened. What's his name? Lucas. Lucas Ferrell Sanders. Lucas. Sarah repeated the name mentally, savoring each syllable. After 25 years, she finally knew the name of her son. Does he know about me? No, but... Dr. Silva made a significant pause. My client would like to arrange a meeting, if you want, of course. Sarah's heart was beating so hard, she was surprised she wasn't having a heart attack. A meeting? With him? Yes. Lucas has been looking for information about his biological parents for a few years. He would be very happy to meet you. How do you know this? My client has considerable resources to obtain this kind of information. Sarah stopped pacing and stared at the lawyer. What does he want in return? Pardon? Your mysterious client. Nobody does this kind of thing out of pure kindness. What does he want from me? Dr. Silva smiled, and there was something calculated in that smile. My client simply wants justice to be done, for the mistakes of the past to be corrected. And if I don't want to get involved, then nothing happens. You continue your life, and Lucas continues his, without ever knowing the truth about his origins. It was a subtle threat, but clear. Cooperate with us or lose the chance to meet your son. I need to think, said Sarah. Of course, but don't take too long. Opportunities like this don't come every day. Dr. Silva closed her briefcase and stood up. When you make your decision, call me. After the lawyer left, Sarah locked herself in the bathroom and cried until she had no more tears. When she finally managed to compose herself, she returned to her office and found Ethan waiting for her. We need to talk, he said without preamble. About what? About the lawyer who just left here. Sarah's blood froze. How do you know about her? Because I have security cameras in the building, and because I recognize Dr. Rebecca Silva. She works for my brother. What? Ethan closed the office. Doran approached her. Sarah, you need to understand something. Daniel isn't trying to help you, he's manipulating you. But she knew about my son. She knew details that only someone with access to the records could know. Because Daniel has access to the same diaries I do. He read everything about you and the pregnancy. He's using this information to control you. Sarah sat heavily in her chair. Why? What does he gain from this? Control over you, and through you, control over me. Ethan knelt beside her chair, forcing her to look at him. Sarah, my brother, has always been obsessive about power. He grew up feeling like the second son, the less important one. When I came back to take over the presidency, it messed with all his insecurities. That still doesn't explain why he wants to manipulate me. Because he realized you're important to me, and anything that's important to me becomes a potential weapon for him. Sarah studied him carefully. How did he realize that? Ethan hesitated, as if struggling with something internal. Because I can't hide what I feel for you. The silence that followed was charged with an intensity that made the air in the small office seem denser. Sarah looked into Ethan's amber eyes, seeing vulnerability, desire, and something deeper that frightened her. Ethan, you barely know me. That's not true. I know you from reading my father's words about you. I know your strength, your courage, your capacity for sacrifice. And since that night when our eyes met, I knew there was something inevitable between us. This is crazy. Maybe. He extended his hand, gently touching her face. But it's my kind of crazy. And if you're honest with yourself, you'll admit you feel it too. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of his hand against her skin. It was true. Since that first encounter, there had been something burning inside her, something she tried to ignore, but that grew with each conversation, each shared look. Ethan, even if I felt something, this can't happen. You're my boss. I'm a divorced employee with a teenage daughter. We have completely different worlds. Worlds that connected through my father, he said softly. Maybe this isn't coincidence. Maybe it's destiny. I don't believe in destiny. Then believe in me. He moved closer, his voice low and intense. Believe that I can protect you from my brother. Believe that we can discover the truth about your son together. Believe that what's being born between us is worth fighting for. Sarah opened her eyes and found him so close she could feel his breath. It would be so easy to close the distance between them, to let the desire bubbling inside her take control. But reason still spoke louder. And Emily, my daughter is already being watched by your brother. If we get involved, if this becomes public, she'll pay the price. I won't let that happen. How can you guarantee that? Because I'm going to get you and Emily out of here tonight. Sarah pulled away abruptly. What? I have a house in Concord, isolated, secure. You can stay there while we investigate the situation, away from Daniel, away from the curious eyes of the company. Ethan, this is insane. I can't just disappear. I have responsibilities. Emily has school. Emily can study remotely for a few days, and your responsibilities here don't matter if you're not safe. Safe from what? Daniel is manipulative, but he's not physically dangerous, is he? Ethan was silent for a moment, and there was something in his expression that made Sarah's stomach contract. Ethan, is he dangerous? I don't know, but I'm not willing to find out using you and your daughter as a test. At that moment, the phone on Sarah's desk rang. She answered automatically. Sarah Mitchell. Mom? Emily's voice sounded tense, scared. There's someone here at school asking for you. Sarah's heart stopped. Who? A man. Blonde, well-dressed. He said he works with you and needs to talk about a family emergency. Ethan quickly approached, listening to the conversation. Emily, where are you exactly? In the office. They called me to come here. Listen carefully to what I'm going to say. Don't leave the office. Ask them to stay with you until I get there. Don't go with this man under any circumstances, no matter what he says. I'm coming to get you now. Mom, you're scaring me. Just stay where you are. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Sarah hung up the phone and turned to Ethan, panic clear in her eyes. He went after my daughter. Let's get her. Now. They left the building, practically running. Ethan drove his black BMW through the streets of Boston as if he was participating in a race, cutting through traffic and burning yellow lights. Sarah held onto the dashboard, silently praying they would arrive in time. Why would he do this, she asked, her voice trembling. To pressure you, to show that he can reach anyone you love. If he hurts my daughter, he won't hurt her. Daniel is calculating, not violent. He wants to scare, not physically attack. But even as he said this, Ethan pressed harder on the accelerator. They arrived at the school in 15 minutes. Sarah ran to the office, Ethan right behind her. Emily was sitting in a chair, pale but unharmed, a school employee beside her. "Mom!" Emily stood up and ran into Sarah's arms. "Are you okay? He didn't do anything to you?" "No, but it was strange. He knew things about you, about our family. He knew where we live. He knew I have anxiety. How could he know these things?" Sarah hugged her daughter tighter, feeling anger grow inside her like a bonfire. No one had the right to frighten Emily, to use a vulnerable teenager as a piece in adult power games. "Where is he now?" Ethan asked the school employee. "He left when the girl refused to go with him, said he would come back later." Ethan and Sarah exchanged looks. The threat was clear. "Emily," said Sarah, kneeling in front of her daughter, "I need you to be very brave now, okay? We're going to leave the city for a few days." "Why?" "Because that man who came here might try to approach you again, and I won't allow that." Emily looked from Sarah to Ethan, trying to understand the situation. "And who is he?" she asked, indicating Ethan. "My name is Ethan," he said, extending his hand. "I'm a friend of your mother's, and I'm going to help protect you both." Emily shook his hand, studying him with the keen perception she had inherited from her mother. "Are you the reason Mum's been acting strange lately?" Ethan smiled, a genuine expression that softened his serious features. "Partly, yes, but not in the way you're thinking." "How do you know what I'm thinking?" "Because if I were a smart teenager and protected my mother like you protect yours, I would be thinking the same thing." Emily studied him for a few more seconds, then nodded. "Okay, I trust you for now." An hour later, they were on the road to Concord. Sarah had stopped at home quickly to get clothes for her and Emily, while Ethan waited in the car, alert for any sign that they were being followed. Now driving on the I-93, Sarah finally allowed the magnitude of the situation to hit her completely. In less than a week, her life had completely transformed. She had discovered that her son was alive, that she had been the victim of a family conspiracy, that the man she was falling for was the son of the man who had destroyed her life 25 years ago, and now she was fleeing with this same man and her daughter to a house in the countryside, as if they were fugitives. "What have I gotten myself into?" she murmured, looking out the window at the Massachusetts landscape passing by quickly. A situation you didn't ask for and don't deserve," replied Ethan, hearing her question, "but a situation we're going to solve together." In the back seat, Emily had fallen asleep, exhausted by the emotional tension of the day. Ethan looked in the rearview mirror, observing the girl for a moment. "She's just like you," he said softly. "In what way?" "Strong, brave, loyal," he paused, "and beautiful." Sarah felt her face heat up. "Ethan, I know. It's not the right time, not the right situation. But Sarah, when all this is over, when we discover the truth and resolve the situation with Daniel, I want a real chance to get to know you, to show you that what I feel for you is true. And if we discover things about the past that make this impossible, like, what? What if we discover that you are my son?" Ethan almost lost control of the car. "What? Have you thought about that? The dates match. You were born in 1987. I got pregnant in 1998. Sarah stopped. "No, wait, that doesn't make sense. You're older than my son would be." "Sarah, I was born in 1987. My father has a birth certificate, maternity photos, everything documented. And besides, you met my father in 1998. I was already 11 years old at the time." You're right, sorry, I'm confused with all this. It's understandable. But Sarah, no matter what we discover about the past, one thing I know for certain, we're not related. There's nothing preventing us from having a future together, except the circumstances we're facing now. They arrived at the house in Concord at dusk. It was a modern, discreet construction, surrounded by gardens and a breathtaking view of the Massachusetts hills. Ethan had bought the property a few years ago as a personal refuge, a place where he could escape from the pressures of corporate life. While Emily explored the house, marveling at the pool and the view, Sarah and Ethan sat on the terrace watching the sun set behind the hills. "It's beautiful here," she said. "I always come here when I need to think. It's one of the few places where I truly feel at peace." "Thank you," Sarah suddenly said. "For what?" "For protecting Emily, for getting us out of there. I know this has complicated your life, and you could have simply ignored the situation." Ethan turned to face her. "Sarah, you still don't understand, do you? There's nothing I wouldn't do for you, nothing." The intensity in his voice made her look at him, and what she saw in his eyes left her breathless. It wasn't just desire or attraction. It was something deeper, more frightening. It was devotion. "Ethan, you need to be careful with what you feel for me. We barely know each other, and you're already talking as if I'm in love with you." He completed the sentence she couldn't finish. "Because I am, madly, irremediably, in love." "That's impossible. You can't fall in love with someone in a week." "Says who?" Ethan moved closer to her on the terrace sofa. "Who established these rules? That love needs time, traditional courtship, normal situations to flourish?" "Common sense," said Sarah, but her voice was losing conviction. "Common sense says that a 42-year-old woman shouldn't feel like a teenager every time a man looks at her in a certain way. Common sense says you shouldn't be feeling what you're feeling for me right now." Sarah couldn't deny it, because he was right. Every fiber of her being was aware of his proximity, of the heat radiating from his body, of the way his eyes seemed to see straight through all her defenses. "This will complicate everything," she whispered. "Maybe. Or maybe it's the only simple and true thing amid all this madness." When Ethan leaned in to kiss her, Sarah knew she should resist. She knew that crossing that line would change everything irreversibly. But when their lips met, all the reasons to resist simply disappeared. The kiss was everything she had imagined, and much more. Gentle at first, then more urgent, charged with weeks of accumulated tension and repressed desires. When they finally separated, both were breathing heavily. "Mom? Ethan?" Emily's voice from the living room interrupted the moment. They quickly moved apart, trying to regain their composure. "We're here on the terrace, honey," called Sarah, her voice slightly hoarse. Emily appeared at the glass door. "Are you okay? You look like—" She studied them with that keen perception. "Oh, I get it." "Emily, Mom, you don't need to explain. I'm not blind." Emily smiled, an expression too mature for her 17 years. "Just be careful, okay? You both seem like good people, but the situation is complicated." After Emily went back inside, Sarah and Ethan sat in silence for a long moment, processing both the kiss and the surprisingly mature reaction of the teenager. "Your daughter is amazing," Ethan finally said. "She grew up too fast. She had to grow up." "Like you?" Sarah looked at him confused. "You also grew up too fast. Had to mature before your time because of circumstances. That's why I recognize it in Emily. That's why I understand her strength." At that moment, Ethan's phone rang. He looked at the screen and frowned. "It's Daniel." "Don't answer." "I need to answer. If I ignore it, he'll suspect we're together." Ethan answered the call, putting it on speakerphone so Sarah could hear. "Daniel." "Ethan, where are you? I stopped by the office this afternoon and your secretary said you had left early. I decided to work from home today. Why?" "Nothing important, just wanted to discuss some projects." There was a pause. "By the way, have you seen Sarah Mitchell today? She also left early, which is strange for her." Sarah and Ethan exchanged glances. The question wasn't casual. "No, I haven't seen her. Maybe she had some personal commitment." "Maybe. Well, if you talk to her, can you tell her I have some information that might interest her about family matters?" "What kind of information?" "Nothing." That concerns you, brother. They're her personal matters. After Ethan hung up, they looked at each other with concern. He knows we're not home, said Sarah. Or at least he suspects. He probably went by your house, saw that you weren't there. What do we do now? Ethan stood up, walking to the balustrade of the terrace. Now we investigate on our own. No mysterious lawyers, no intermediaries. You want to find your son? Then, let's find him, but our way, on our terms. How? I have contacts in New York, discreet private investigators. If Lucas Ferrell Sanders exists, if he really is your son, we'll find out everything about him without needing Daniel's help. Sarah approached him, standing by his side at the balustrade. Night had fallen completely, and the distant lights of the town twinkled like earthly stars. Ethan, what if we discover that Daniel is right? That my son really exists and wants to meet me? Then you'll meet him, and I'll be by your side to support you. And if we discover it's all a lie, that Daniel is making everything up to manipulate me, then we'll deal with that too, together. Sarah turned to face him. Why are you doing this? Why are you risking so much for me? Ethan pulled her into his arms, looking deeply into her eyes. Because from the moment I saw you in that room, I knew you would be the woman who would change my life forever. And because after years living an empty existence without real purpose, you've given me something worth fighting for. And what is that? A future that really matters. When they kissed again under the stars of the Massachusetts night, Sarah finally allowed hope to bloom in her chest. Maybe, just maybe, from the chaos and pain of the past, something beautiful and true could be born. The next morning brought a crystalline clarity that seemed to contrast with the emotional confusion dominating Sarah's thoughts. She woke up in the master suite of the house in Concord, alone in the king-size bed, but with the vivid memory of the kiss from the night before still burning on her lips. Ethan had been a perfect gentleman, insisting that she and Emily take the main bedrooms while he settled in the office with a sofa bed. But the tension between them was almost palpable, like an electric current running through all the rooms of the house. She went down to the kitchen and found Ethan already awake, preparing coffee, wearing only a grey t-shirt and jeans. His disheveled hair from sleep and his unshaven face gave him a younger, more accessible air. When he turned and smiled at her, Sarah felt her stomach do a somersault. "Good morning," he said, his voice still rough from sleep. "Did you sleep well?" "Better than I expected," she lied. In truth, she had spent most of the night awake thinking about the kiss, the revelations about her son, the uncertain future ahead. "Coffee," offered Ethan, serving a steaming cup. When she took the cup, their fingers briefly touched, and it was as if an electric spark ran up her arm. Ethan felt it too, she could tell by the way his eyes darkened. "Ethan, about last night." "Don't regret it," he said softly, moving closer. "Please don't regret it." "I'm not regretting it. I'm trying to understand how to deal with this, by dealing with it one day at a time, one moment at a time." Emily appeared in the kitchen at that moment, saving Sarah from the intensity of Ethan's gaze. The teenager was wearing one of the house's large robes and had her hair tied in a messy bun. "Good morning, folks," she said, yawning. "I slept like a rock. Must be the clean mountain air." "How are you feeling?" asked Sarah, studying her daughter's face for signs of anxiety or stress. "Strangely well. I know I should be terrified with everything that's happening, but—" Emily grabbed a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen counter. "It's like finally, something interesting is happening in my life. You two are much more exciting than second-year literature classes." Ethan laughed, a genuine laugh that completely transformed his serious expression. "I'm glad to know our existential crisis is serving as entertainment for you," said Sarah, but she was smiling too. "Speaking of existential crisis," Ethan straightened up, returning to professional mode. "I have news. I made some calls last night after you went to sleep. My private investigator in New York has already started looking for information about Lucas Ferrell Sanders." Sarah's heart accelerated. And he exists. He really exists. Menahe. World stopped around Sarah. She leaned on the kitchen counter, her legs suddenly weak. "Are you sure?" I am. Lucas Farrell Sanders, 25 years old, graduated in architecture from NYU, works at the Oliveira and Associates firm in New York, lives alone in an apartment in Greenwich Village, single, no children, and... Ethan paused. He has your eyes, Sarah. How can you know that? Ethan took out his phone and showed a photo he had received. My investigator got some photos from his social media. Sarah looked at the phone screen and the world disappeared around her. There was a tall young man, brown hair, shy smile, and unmistakable green eyes. Her eyes, the same eyes she saw in the mirror every day, that she saw in Emily's face. My God, she whispered, tears beginning to stream down. It's him, it's really my son. Emily approached, looking over her mother's shoulder. He looks like me, she said softly. Or rather, I look like him. You have the same eyes, confirmed Ethan. The same jawline, the same shape of the eyebrows. Sarah couldn't stop looking at the photo. After 25 years, she was finally seeing the face of the son she had carried for 9 months, whom she had lost at the moment of birth, whom she had silently mourned for decades. Does he know about me? She asked, her voice choked. This is where the situation gets complicated, said Ethan, putting away the phone. According to my investigator, Lucas really has been looking for information about his biological parents, but he hired a different investigator about 6 months ago, someone who so far hasn't been able to find anything. Why? Because the records were altered. Someone took the trouble to erase or modify documents to make the search difficult. Sarah frowned. Who would do that? Someone who doesn't want the truth to come to light. Someone who has a lot to lose if the real story is discovered. At that moment, Ethan's phone rang. He looked at the screen and his expression hardened. It's Daniel again. Answer it, said Sarah. If you keep ignoring him, he'll get even more suspicious. Ethan answered, putting it on speakerphone. Daniel. Ethan, good morning. I hope you slept well, as wherever you are. The implication was clear. Daniel knew Ethan wasn't home. I'm working remotely today. Why? Just wanted to let you know. I had an interesting conversation with some company employees yesterday. It seems our dear Sarah Mitchell has been receiving mysterious visitors, lawyers, people asking questions about her. Ethan and Sarah exchanged glances. Daniel was making it clear he knew about Dr. Rebecca Silver's visit. Interesting, said Ethan, keeping his voice neutral. Any specific problem? I don't know, but I'm concerned about the company's reputation. You know how it is, employees involved in delicate situations can affect our image in the market. Are you implying something? Just that it would be a shame if we had to make difficult decisions about the staff, especially someone as dedicated as Ms. Mitchell. The threat was veiled but clear. Ethan clenched his fists. Daniel, if you have any specific concerns about any employee, I suggest you follow the appropriate company protocols. Of course, brother. I always follow protocols. There was a loaded pause. By the way, I hope you show up at the company today. We have an important meeting with investors at 3 in the afternoon. Your presence is essential. I'll be there. Great. And Ethan, if you have news of Ms. Mitchell, can you tell her I still have that information? About family matters I mentioned yesterday? She can come to me whenever she wants. After Ethan hung up, the silence in the kitchen was heavy as lead. He's pressuring us, said Sarah. He is, and we can't ignore it for much longer. Emily, who had been quiet during the call, finally spoke. He's dangerous, isn't he? Ethan looked at her with renewed respect for the girl's insight. Yes, Emily, he is dangerous. Not physically necessarily, but in other ways. He can destroy careers, reputations, lives. So what do we do? We accelerate our investigation, said Ethan. Sarah, my investigator got Lucas's work address. If we want to talk to him, we can go to New York today. Sarah's heart raced. Today? Why wait? The longer we delay, the more time Daniel has to elaborate his plans. And if Lucas really wants to meet you, why not give him that opportunity? What if he doesn't want to meet me? What if he's happy with the life he has and doesn't want me showing up out of nowhere? Ethan approached her, holding her hands. Then, we'll respect his decision. But Sarah, you've spent 25 years thinking your son was dead. Now you know he's alive and looking for you. Don't you think you deserve to at least try? Sarah looked at Emily, who nodded encouragingly. Do it, Mom. I'll be fine here. Actually, I can take advantage of studying for the SATs in peace. I'm not going to leave you alone. She won't be alone, said Ethan. I have a couple who take care of the property, Mike and Sylvia. They're completely trustworthy and can stay with Emily while we go to New York. I don't know. Mom, Emily interrupted, her voice firm. You've spent your entire life sacrificing yourself for me. Now it's your turn to do something. For yourself. Go find my brother. The way Emily said my brother made Sarah start crying again. Her daughter was accepting the situation with a maturity that made her both proud and sad at the same time. 2 hours later, Sarah and Ethan were on the road to New York. Ethan had arranged for Mike and Sylvia, a couple in their 60s who had been taking care of the property for more than a decade, to stay with Emily. The teenager had adapted to their presence with surprising ease, already chatting with Sylvia about New England dessert recipes. During the trip, Ethan and Sarah talked about strategies for approaching Lucas. They decided that the best approach would be the most direct. Show up at his office, identify themselves, and ask to talk. There was no easy way to tell someone that the mother he thought was dead was alive and wanted to meet him. Are you nervous? Asked Ethan, looking at Sarah as he drove. Terrified, she admitted. What if he hates me for abandoning him? You didn't abandon him. You were deceived, manipulated. There's a difference. For him, there might not be. Ethan extended his hand and took hers, intertwining their fingers. Sarah, no matter how he initially reacts, you're doing the right thing. He deserves to know the truth, and you deserve to have the chance to meet him. The trip to New York took about 5 hours. They arrived in the city in the middle of the afternoon, the intense traffic of the city contrasting with the tranquility of the Massachusetts hills they had left behind. Ethan had reserved rooms at a hotel in Greenwich Village, close to the office where Lucas worked. They settled into the hotel, and Ethan called his investigator to confirm that Lucas was at work that day. The confirmation came quickly. Yes, he was there, and he had no trips planned for the next few days. So it's now or never, said Sarah, looking at herself in the bathroom mirror of the hotel. She had changed clothes 3 times, finally choosing a discreet and elegant navy blue dress. She wanted to look respectable, maternal, but not desperate. You look beautiful, said Ethan, appearing behind her in the mirror. And you're strong. You'll make it. They kissed quickly, a kiss of encouragement and support, before leaving the hotel toward the Oliveira and Associates office. The building was modern, made of glass and steel, in the heart of Greenwich Village. In the elevator going up to the 10th floor, Sarah felt as if her heart would explode inside her chest. 25 years since she had held her newborn baby for a few seconds before they took him away. The office reception was elegant, with contemporary furniture and plants that gave a touch of nature to the urban environment. The receptionist, a smiling young woman, attended to them promptly. Good afternoon, how can I help you? Ethan stepped forward. Good afternoon. We'd like to speak with the architect Lucas Ferrell Sanders. It's about a personal project. I'll check if he's available. Can you give me your names? Sarah took a deep breath. Sarah Mitchell. And tell him it's about his biological family. The receptionist blinked, surprised, but maintained her professionalism. One moment, please. She dialed an extension and spoke in a low voice. After a few minutes, she hung up and addressed them again. Mr. Lucas will receive you. It's room 1015 at the end of the corridor to the right. Sarah and Ethan walked down the corridor in silence. Each step seemed an eternity. When they reached the door with the name Lucas Ferrell Sanders, architect, Sarah stopped. I can't, she whispered. What if? Hey, Ethan pulled her into his arms right there in the corridor. You can do this. You're the bravest woman I know, and no matter what happens in there, I'm with you. Sarah nodded, took a deep breath and knocked on the door. "Come in," came a male voice from the other side. They entered the room, and Sarah felt as if she was going to faint. There, behind a desk full of architectural plans, was her son. In person, he looked even more like her than in the photos. The green eyes, the shape of the face, even the way he frowned when concentrating, everything was familiar in a way that hurt in her chest. Lucas stood up, studying them with curiosity. "And caution. Ms. Mitchell, you said it was about my biological family?" His voice was deep, educated, with a slight New York accent. Sarah tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come out. Ethan stepped forward again. "Lucas, my name is Ethan Parker, and this is Sarah Mitchell. We believe she is your biological mother." The silence that followed was deafening. Lucas looked from Ethan to Sarah, his green eyes wide. "My biological mother," he repeated, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. "But they told me she had died in childbirth." "I didn't die," said Sarah finally, her voice coming out as a strangled whisper. "They told me that you had died. For 25 years I thought I had lost you." Lucas sat heavily in his chair, running his hands through his hair, a gesture that Sarah immediately recognized as her own habit when she was nervous. "This can't be happening," he murmured. "I've been looking for you for months. I hired an investigator, searched through records, and nothing." "The records were altered," explained Ethan. "Someone went to a lot of trouble to prevent you from finding each other." Lucas raised his eyes, studying Ethan carefully. "And who are you in this story?" "It's complicated," said Ethan. "My father he was the man with whom your mother was involved in 1998. The man who unfortunately participated in the decision to separate you." "Your father?" Lucas stood up abruptly. "Frank Parker was my biological father." "No," said Sarah quickly. "No, Lucas, Frank wasn't your father. He was married. I worked for his company on a project in Washington, D.C. We got involved. I got pregnant, and his family thought it would be better if you were given up for adoption." "But who is my father, then?" Ethan and Sarah looked at each other. It was a question for which they had no answer. "I don't know," admitted Sarah. "Frank never claimed you were his son. At the time, I always believed you were, but now I'm not sure." Lucas walked to the window of his office, looking at the city below. After a long silence, he turned around. "Can I ask some questions?" "Of course," said Sarah. "Why did you appear now, after all these years?" Ethan answered, "Because my father died recently and left diaries. That's how we discovered you existed, and that your mother had been deceived about your death." "And you?" Lucas looked directly at Sarah. "Why did you never look for me before?" Tears returned to Sarah's eyes. "Because I truly believed you had. They showed me falsified documents, a fake death certificate. I even visited your supposed grave for years." The pain in her voice was so palpable that Lucas instinctively moved closer. "Mom?" he said softly, and the word sounded like music to Sarah's ears. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'm your mother." Lucas hesitated for a moment, then opened his arms. Sarah threw herself into them, and for the first time in 25 years, mother and son embraced. They cried together for long minutes, 25 years of separation and pain being released in that embrace. Ethan watched from the side, moved by the scene and relieved to have managed to reunite two people who deserved to know each other. When they finally separated, Lucas held Sarah's face between his hands, studying every detail. "You're real," he said, amazed. "All my life I dreamed of this moment, but never thought it would actually happen." "I dreamed too," said Sarah. "Every night I dreamed of you." They talked for hours. Lucas told about his childhood with his adoptive parents, who had been wonderful and loved him as their own. He talked about his passion for architecture, his relationships, his dreams. Sarah told about Emily, about the divorce, about the difficult years raising her daughter alone. "I have a sister," asked Lucas, his eyes shining. "Half-sister," corrected Sarah. "Emily. She's 17 and is anxious to meet you." "How did she react when she found out about me?" "Better than I expected. She said she always wanted to have an older brother. Ethan, who had remained quiet during most of the conversation, finally intervened. "Lucas, I need to alert you about something. The situation that led to your separation. There are still people involved who may not want the truth to come to light. People who might try to harm your mother, or even you." "What kind of people?" "My brother, mainly. Daniel Parker. He discovered the situation and is using the information to manipulate your mother." Lucas frowned, his face assuming a serious expression. "Manipulate how?" Ethan explained about the veiled threats, about Daniel appearing at Emily's school, about the mysterious lawyer. "This is serious," said Lucas. "You should go to the police." "With what evidence?" asked Sarah. "Daniel is smart. He hasn't done anything technically illegal. Everything is insinuations, veiled threats." Lucas thought for a moment. "What if I help you?" "How?" "I'm an architect, but I'm also good at investigation. I spent months researching my own story. Maybe I can find evidence that you couldn't." Ethan and Sarah exchanged glances. The idea of involving Lucas in the dangerous situation worried them, but there was also logic in his proposal. "Lucas, this could be dangerous," warned Sarah. "I don't want you to risk yourself right after we've found each other." "Mom," he said, and again the word sounded wonderful to her, "I spent 25 years without a biological family. Now that I've found you, I'll do everything I can to protect you." It was almost midnight when they returned to the hotel. Lucas had insisted on having dinner with them, wanting to know everything about Sarah and Emily. They arranged to meet the next day to begin the joint investigation. In the hotel room, Sarah sat on the bed, still processing everything that had happened. "I can't believe I finally met him," she said to Ethan. "My son, my baby, who became an incredible man." Ethan sat next to her, pulling her into his arms. "He's wonderful, intelligent, brave, caring. You should be proud." "I am. But I'm also afraid." "Of what?" "Of losing him again. Of Daniel finding out where he is and trying to hurt him too." Ethan kissed the top of her head. "We won't let that happen." "How can you be so sure?" "Because now we're 3 against 1. And because I have something to lose that's more important than any company or fortune." Sarah pulled away to look into his eyes. "What is it?" "You, Emily, and now Lucas too. You've become my family, Sarah, and I protect my family." When they kissed that night, it was different from previous kisses. It wasn't just desire or passion. It was promise, commitment, the certainty that no matter what lay ahead, they would face it together. Sarah fell asleep in Ethan's arms for the first time, feeling more complete than she had felt in decades. She had her son back, she had a brave and mature daughter, and she had a man who loved her enough to risk everything for her. But the next morning, when Ethan checked the messages on his phone, there were 15 missed calls from Daniel, and a text message that made his blood freeze. "Brother, I hope your trip to New York has been productive. When you return, we have much to discuss. Oh, and send my regards to Lucas Ferrell Sanders. It would be a shame if something happened to such a promising young architect." Ethan showed the message to Sarah, who immediately turned pale. "He knows," she whispered. "Daniel knows we've found Lucas." "And now he's threatening your son too." Sarah got up from the bed, starting to pace back and forth across the room. "We have to go back. We have to protect Emily and Lucas." "Calm down," said Ethan, also getting up. "Let's think carefully. If we rush back now, we'll be doing exactly what Daniel wants. He wants us to panic." "And what do you suggest?" "That we accelerate our investigation. Lucas said he can help. Let's use that. Let's find concrete evidence against Daniel before returning to Boston. What if he hurts Emily while we're gone? Mike and Sylvia are with her, and Daniel is calculating, not impulsive. He won't do anything precipitous against Emily while he doesn't know exactly where we are and what we're doing." Sarah wasn't convinced, but agreed to give one more day to the investigation. They met with Lucas early in the morning, and he had brought some surprising discoveries. "I researched the name Daniel Parker last night," he said, showing some printed documents. And I found something interesting. Did you know he was adopted too? Ethan stopped drinking his coffee. What? Daniel Parker was adopted by the Parker family when he was 5 years old. That is, he's not Frank Parker's biological son. The revelation hit Ethan like a punch to the stomach. That's impossible. My father never mentioned... It's all here. Lucas spread the documents on the table. Adoption certificate, orphanage, records. Daniel was born in 1991, was given up for adoption in 1996, and adopted by the Parker family in the same year. Sarah studied the documents, a chill running down her spine. Ethan, this changes everything. If Daniel discovered he was adopted, if he knows he's not really a Parker, that would explain a lot about his behavior, said Ethan slowly. The insecurity, the competitiveness, the constant need to prove his worth. And it would explain why he's so desperate to control the narrative about the family's past, added Lucas. If the truth about my adoption comes to light, it could lead to the discovery of his adoption too. The three looked at each other, understanding that the situation was even more complex than they had imagined. We have to go back, said Sarah. Finally. Emily can't stay away from me any longer, and now that we know this about Daniel, we need to confront him. Ethan nodded. But let's do it right, with evidence, with a plan, with legal protection. I'm coming with you, said Lucas. Lucas, no, protested Sarah. You have a life here, a job. Mom, he interrupted, holding her hands. I spent 25 years without you. I'm not going to let someone separate us again. And so, 3 hours later, they were on the road back to Massachusetts, but this time they weren't fleeing. They were returning to fight. The trip back to Massachusetts was tense and silent. Lucas followed Ethan and Sarah in his own car, a white Civic he had bought 2 years ago. Through the rearview mirror, Sarah could see him driving with the same focused concentration she recognized in herself. It was surreal to think that that man, that successful and independent architect, was the baby she had carried for 9 months and lost in a matter of minutes. Ethan drove with visible tension in his shoulders, constantly checking the rearview, mirrors as if expecting to be followed. Daniel's threatening messages had changed the dynamics of everything. It was no longer just about discovering the truth or confronting the past. Now, it was about protecting the people who had become the center of both their worlds. Do you think Emily is okay? Asked Sarah for the 10th time in 2 hours. Mike sent me a message an hour ago. She's studying in the house library and helped Sylvia make cornbread. She's safe. But even as he said this, Ethan felt a growing unease in his chest. He knew Daniel better than anyone, and he knew that when his brother felt cornered, he became unpredictable. The discovery about his own adoption would certainly make him desperate, and desperate people did unthinkable things. They arrived at the house in Concord in the late afternoon, the setting sun painting the hills with golden and orange hues. Emily ran out of the house the moment the cars stopped, and Sarah barely managed to get out of the car before being wrapped in a tight hug from her daughter. "Mom, I missed you. How was it? Did you find him?" "I did," said Sarah, smiling through the tears that always came when she thought about the reunion with Lucas. "And he's here." Emily turned when Lucas got out of his own car, and for a moment brother and sister simply looked at each other. The resemblance was undeniable. The same green eyes, the same jawline, even the way they tilted their heads when curious. "Hi," said Emily, suddenly shy. "Hi," responded Lucas, approaching carefully. "You must be Emily, your mother. Our mother talked a lot about you." "You're taller than I thought," said Emily, and then laughed at her own comment. "Sorry, I don't know what to say. I've never had a brother before." "Nor I a sister," said Lucas, smiling. "Want to try figuring it out together?" The hug that followed was tentative at first, then warmer. Sarah watched with a tight heart, seeing her 2 children finally meeting. Mike and Sylvia appeared on the porch, smiling at the family scene. The caretaker couple had looked after the property for so long, they were almost family to Ethan, and seeing him finally with people he loved made them visibly happy. "Everything okay here?" Ethan asked Mike as everyone entered the house. Peaceful. Mr. Ethan, the girl is an angel, spent the whole day studying and helping Mrs. Sylvia in the kitchen. We didn't have any visitors, no strange calls. But even with the confirmation that everything was fine, Ethan noticed how Sarah kept Emily always close by, as if afraid to let her out of sight for more than a few minutes. Protective motherhood had intensified since Daniel's threats, and he understood perfectly. If someone threatened the people he loved, he would react the same way. During dinner, Lucas told Emily about his life in New York, his architecture projects, his hobbies. In exchange, Emily talked about school, her plans for college, her battles, with anxiety. It was touching to see how quickly they developed a connection, as if 25 years of separation could be overcome in a few hours of honest conversation. "Lucas," said Ethan after dinner, when they were all in the living room, "I need you to understand something. Daniel knows you exist. He knows where you work, probably knows where you live. If you stay with us, you'll be assuming a real risk." "What kind of risk?" asked Emily, anxiety beginning to appear in her voice. Sarah approached her daughter, holding her hand. "Daniel is complicated. He has been using information about our past to try to control us. Now that he knows about Lucas, he might try the same thing." "But why?" asked Lucas. "What does he gain from this?" "Power," said Ethan simply. "Daniel has always lived in the shadow of our father, always felt like the second son, the less important one. When I came back to take over the presidency of the company, it messed with all his insecurities. And now that we know he was adopted," added Sarah. "Wait," Emily interrupted. "He was adopted. So he's not really your brother, Ethan?" "Biologically, no, but we grew up together. I considered him my brother until he started acting destructively." Lucas stood up, walking to the window overlooking the hills. "So we're three people who were affected by decisions others made about our lives. Me, Daniel, and—" He looked at Sarah. "You too, Mom. We were all victims of family manipulations. The difference," said Ethan, "is that you and your mother are victims who want justice and truth. Daniel is a victim who wants revenge and control." That night, after Emily and Lucas went to sleep, Emily in the main guest room and Lucas in the office that had become an improvised bedroom, Sarah and Ethan were alone on the terrace. The mountain air was cool, full of the perfume of flowers growing in the gardens around the house. "Ethan," said Sarah, leaning against the balustrade, "I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me." "I always am. Are you sure your feelings for me aren't just a projection? A way to deal with the guilt for what your father did?" Ethan approached her, touching her face delicately. "Sarah, if my feelings for you were based on guilt, I would have offered you money, a better job, maybe help to find Lucas. I wouldn't have fallen in love with you. How can you be so sure? Because guilt doesn't make you stay awake at night thinking about someone's smile. Guilt doesn't make your heart race every time that person enters the room. Guilt doesn't make you want to wake up beside that person every day for the rest of your life." His words took Sarah's breath away. "Ethan, I love you," he said simply. "Not because of my father, not despite my father. I love you because you're brave when you're afraid, strong when you feel weak, and generous even when the world hasn't been generous to you. I love you because when you look at Emily and Lucas, your eyes shine in a way that makes me want to be part of this family." "And I love you too," said Sarah, the words coming out before she could stop them, which is completely insane, considering we've known each other for only 2 weeks. 2 weeks that changed our lives forever. When they kissed, it was with the urgency of people who knew time was limited, that external forces were working to separate them. Ethan pulled her closer, his hands tangling in her hair, while Sarah lost herself in the sensation of being in the arms of the man she loved. "Sarah," he murmured against her lips, "no matter what happens with Daniel, with the company, with anything, I won't let you go. What if we don't have a choice? We always have a choice." The next morning they were awakened by the insistent sound of Ethan's phone. He answered, still sleepy, having fallen asleep on the terrace sofa after spending hours talking with Sarah. "Ethan?" It was Mike's tense voice. What is it? There's a car at the property entrance. A black BMW. The driver is honking and shouting that he wants to talk to you. Ethan straightened up instantly. Daniel. Sarah, who had slept in the master suite, appeared on the terrace wearing a robe, her hair disheveled and her eyes still, swollen from sleep. What's happening? Daniel is here. The fear that crossed her face was instantaneous. Emily and Lucas, they're safe. Mike won't let him in without my authorization. Ethan called Mike back. Tell him I'm coming to talk. To him. But don't let him pass the gate. All right, Mr. Ethan, but he seems agitated. 20 minutes later, Ethan was walking down the dirt road leading to the property gate. Sarah had insisted on accompanying him, and Lucas too, despite the protests of both. Emily had stayed in the house with Mike and Sylvia, with express instructions not to leave their sight. Daniel was leaning on the hood of his BMW, smoking a cigarette, a habit he had abandoned years ago. When he saw Ethan approaching, he threw the cigarette to the ground and stomped on it with more force than necessary. Little brother, he said, his voice loaded with sarcasm. Good that you finally decided to appear. What do you want, Daniel? Dear. Ethan, always straight to the point. Daniel smiled, but there was something disturbing in that smile. I want to present my compliments to Ms. Mitchell and young Lucas. What a touching family reunion. Ethan positioned himself slightly in front of Sarah and Lucas, an instinctive, protective gesture. You shouldn't be here. Shouldn't I? Daniel laughed, a harsh sound without humor. This is Parker family property. I am a Parker, or at least I was until I discovered some interesting truths about my own history. The tension in the air intensified. Ethan realized that Daniel knew about his adoption. Daniel. Did you know? Interrupted Daniel, his voice suddenly furious. All these years, did you know I wasn't really your brother? I didn't know. I discovered yesterday when Lucas found the records. Daniel turned to Lucas, studying him with uncomfortable intensity. So you must be the famous lost son. The baby my dear adoptive father took the trouble to hide. He laughed again. You know, it's funny. All of us here were affected by Frank Parker's lies. Me, you, your mother. He laughed again. The difference is that I grew up in his house, was raised with his lies, lived under the weight of his impossible expectations. Daniel, our father loved you, said Ethan. He may have made mistakes, but he considered you his son. Second-class son, spat Daniel. It was always you who was the heir, the favorite, the one who received the best opportunities. And do you know why? Because you were blood of his blood, and I was just a charity case. Sarah took a step forward, her voice calm but firm. Daniel, you have every right to be furious with Frank, but you have no right to threaten my daughter or to use my son to get revenge. Your daughter? Daniel tilted his head. Ah, yes, little Emily, lovely girl, so vulnerable, so emotionally fragile. It would be a shame if she discovered some unpleasant truths about her mother's family. Ethan took a threatening step toward his brother. If you touch Emily... Calm down, little brother. I won't touch anyone. I don't need to. Daniel smiled, coldly. You know, I spent the night researching our dear Sarah Mitchell, and I discovered fascinating things. Sarah's stomach dropped. What things? For example, that you weren't just an innocent intern when you got involved with Frank. You were already married. The world stopped around Sarah. Ethan turned to look at her, confusion and surprise clear in his eyes. What? Murmured Ethan. Oh, she didn't tell you? Daniel was clearly delighting in the moment. Sarah Mitchell was Sarah Wilson at the time. Married for 2 years to a lawyer named Robert Wilson. The same Robert Wilson she married again years later, and from whom she divorced recently. Lucas looked at his mother, trying to process the information. Mom? Daniel, stop, said Sarah, her voice trembling. Why should I stop? Isn't truth liberating? Daniel was clearly enjoying every second. The truth is that you cheated on your husband with my father. The truth is that when you got pregnant you weren't sure who the baby's father was. The truth is that Frank Parker might not have been Lucas's father after all. The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan looked at Sarah as if he had never seen her before. Lucas was pale, his hands trembling slightly. "Is it true?" asked Ethan, his voice coming out hoarse. Sarah closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. "It's more complicated than that." "More complicated?" Ethan moved away from her. "Sarah, you told me Frank wasn't married when you got involved. You let me believe you were the innocent victim in this story. I was young, I was confused. You were married," exploded Ethan. "You cheated on your husband and then lied to me about it. Ethan, please, let me explain." "Explain what? That our entire relationship was based on lies?" Daniel watched the discussion with evident satisfaction. "Ah, trouble in paradise, what a shame." Lucas, who had been quiet until then, finally spoke. "Mum, I need to know. Was Frank Parker my father or not?" I don't know," admitted Sarah, her voice broken. "At the time I thought so. The dates matched. But now, with everything we've discovered—" "So it's possible that my father is Robert Wilson?" asked Lucas. "It's possible." So Ethan ran his hands through his hair, clearly trying to process everything. "Sarah, do you understand what this means? If Frank wasn't Lucas's father, then our entire investigation, our whole search for the truth, was based on a false premise." "It wasn't false," protested Sarah. "Lucas was given up for adoption against my will. That continues to be true no matter who his father is." "But it changes everything about our connection," said Ethan, his voice cold. "It changes everything about why we met, about what this means. If my father wasn't romantically involved with you in the way we thought—" "Ethan, are you letting this change your feelings for me?" "I don't know," he said honestly. "I don't know anymore what's truth and what's a lie." Daniel clapped slowly. "Bravo! What a dramatic performance. But now that we've clarified these family matters, can we talk business?" "What business?" asked Ethan, still looking at Sarah with pain and confusion. "The company, dear brother. Our beloved Parker Engineering. See, with all these revelations about our family past, I think it would be better if you stepped away from the presidency." Ethan finally turned completely to Daniel. "What? Think about it. You're romantically involved with a company employee. An employee who had an affair with our father and who lied about her marital situation at the time. When this story leaks, and it will leak, what kind of damage will it cause to the company's reputation? You wouldn't dare what? Protect the interests of the company I consider my family?" Daniel smiled. "Ethan, you've always been good at engineering but terrible at politics. Did you really think you could get involved with Sarah Mitchell without consequences?" Lucas stepped forward, his voice firm despite the evident tension. "And what exactly do you want?" Daniel turned to him, evaluating him. "Intelligent, direct. I like that. What I want is simple. Ethan resigns from the company presidency and passes control to me. In exchange, all this inconvenient information about the past remains private." "And if I refuse?" asked Ethan. "Then tomorrow morning all the major newspapers in Massachusetts will have a very interesting story about the president of Parker Engineering and his scandalous romance with an employee who had an affair with his late father." "That would destroy not only my reputation but Sarah's too," said Ethan. "Exactly. And Emily's too, by extension. Teenagers can be cruel when it comes to family scandals." Daniel looked directly at Sarah. "It would be a shame if your daughter had to change schools because of malicious comments from classmates." The threat to Emily was the last straw for Sarah. She approached Daniel, her eyes flashing with anger. "You can do whatever you want with me. You can destroy my reputation, you can end my career. But if you touch one hair on my daughter's head, I swear that—" "That what?" Daniel smiled. "What can a divorced administrative manager do against me?" It was Lucas who answered, his voice calm but loaded with determination. "She might not be able to do anything, but I can." Everyone turned to look at him. "See, Daniel, you made a mistake in threatening me. Because I'm not just an architect. I'm an architect who spent months investigating my own family history. I know how to find information, how to track documents, how to discover truths that people prefer to keep buried. And what does that mean? It means I can start investigating you, Your adoption, the circumstances that led to it, the reasons why Frank Parker decided to adopt a 5-year-old boy. Lucas smiled, but there was no warmth in that smile. Something tells me there are secrets about your past that you wouldn't want to come to light. For the first time since he arrived, Daniel seemed genuinely concerned. You don't know anything. Not yet, but I can learn. And unlike you, I don't have a corporate reputation to protect. I have nothing to lose. The tension between the two men was palpable. Ethan watched, fascinated despite everything, seeing Lucas, whom he had barely known for 2 days, defend his family with a ferocity he hadn't expected. Lucas, you don't understand who you're messing with, said Daniel, his voice now loaded with real threat. And you don't understand that I'm not afraid of you, responded Lucas. I spent 25 years thinking I was an orphan. I discovered I have a brave mother and a strong sister. I won't let you threaten them. Daniel looked from Lucas to Ethan to Sarah, as if calculating his options. Finally he laughed, a cold sound without humor. What a touching family. The bastard brother, the lying mother, and the lost son. He walked back to his car. But don't worry, this isn't over, far from it. Before getting into the car, he turned one last time. Ethan, you have until Monday to make your decision. Presidency of the company or public destruction of all of you. Choose wisely. The BMW disappeared in a cloud of dust, leaving the three standing on the road, processing everything that had happened. Ethan was the first to move, walking toward the house without looking at Sarah or Lucas. Sarah ran after him. Ethan, wait. He stopped but didn't turn around. I need time to think. Ethan, about Robert, about having been married. Sarah, you lied to me. You let me believe in a version of the story that wasn't true. How can I trust you now? Because what I feel for you is true, she shouted. Because no matter what happened in the past, no matter what mistakes I made when I was young and stupid, what we have is real. Ethan finally turned around and the pain in his eyes almost destroyed her. Is it real? How can I be sure? How can I know I'm not just another piece in your emotional chessboard? Because I love you, she said simply. I love you in a way I've never loved anyone. Not Robert, not Frank, no one. You're the man who makes me feel alive again. Ethan looked at her for a long moment, the internal struggle evident in his expression. I need time, he repeated. I need to process all this. How much time? I don't know, but Sarah, no matter what I decide about us, I won't let Daniel hurt you or the kids. That I promise. It was little, but it was something. Sarah nodded and headed for the door. Ethan, yes? What you felt for me when we met, before knowing anything about the past, and was that real? He hesitated, then nodded. It was real. Then hold on to that. Because I felt it too. And feelings like that don't come along every day. That night, Sarah could barely sleep. The next day, she would have to return to Boston, face the company, figure out how to deal with Daniel's threats. And she would do all this without being sure if Ethan would be by her side. But one thing she knew, no matter what happened, she wouldn't let Daniel destroy her family. She had found Lucas after 25 years. She had a brave and strong daughter, and she had experienced true love with Ethan. If Daniel wanted a war, he would get one. But this time, Sarah Mitchell would not be a passive victim. She would be a fighter. Monday arrived like an inevitable storm. Sarah woke up before dawn after a night practically sleepless, Daniel's ultimatum echoing in her mind like a constant drum. Ethan had left early for the company without saying goodbye, leaving only a note saying he needed to resolve some issues before making any decision. Lucas was in the kitchen when she came down, already dressed and obviously prepared for something. Good morning, Mum. Did you sleep well? Lying doesn't suit you, said Sarah, serving coffee with hands that trembled slightly. What are you planning? I'm going to Boston with you, and before you protest, I already called my boss in New York and explained that I have a family emergency. He understood. Lucas, this could be dangerous. Daniel isn't bluffing. Neither am I. Lucas approached her, holding her hands. Mom, I spent the entire night researching, and I found some very interesting things about our dear Daniel. What kind of things? Lucas opened the laptop that was on the kitchen counter. First, about his adoption. Daniel wasn't adopted at 5 years old out of kindness. He was removed from a situation of extreme abuse. His biological mother, Marsha Parker, was Frank's sister. Sarah stopped with the cup halfway to her mouth. What? Marsha was addicted to drugs, prostituted herself to support her addiction, and mistreated Daniel in ways that the social reports of the time describe as inhumane. Frank didn't adopt Daniel out of charity. He adopted him because he was his biological nephew. That means that Daniel is really a Parker, not Frank's son, but nephew, blood of the family. Lucas navigated to another page. But here it gets interesting. Marsha Parker was found, dead 3 months after the adoption, overdose. But according to police records, there were signs that someone forced the overdose. Sarah's stomach contracted. Are you implying that... I'm implying that Frank may have ordered his own sister, killed to protect Daniel and the family's reputation. And more importantly, if Daniel discovered this recently, it would explain a lot about his behavior. Emily appeared in the kitchen at that moment, already dressed for school. Mom, is everything okay? You're talking about some very serious things. We're trying to resolve the situation with Uncle Daniel, said Lucas, and Sarah noticed how he naturally referred to Emily as family. The bad man who threatened you? Asked Emily. Despite trying to spare the details, she had captured the essence of the situation. The same. Emily sat next to them. Can I help? Honey, this is too dangerous. Mom, I'm not a child anymore. And besides, I have an idea. Sarah and Lucas looked at her expectantly. You said Daniel wants Ethan to give up the presidency of the company, right? And that he'll make your story public if Ethan doesn't accept? Right. Then why don't we make it public first? On our terms, in our way? Lucas raised his eyebrows. Go on. My writing teacher is a journalist. She works part-time at the Boston Globe and always says the best way to deal with scandals is to tell your own version before others tell it for you. Sarah considered the idea. It was risky, but there was logic to it. Emily, this would affect you too. At school with your friends? Mum, I'd rather face gossip with the truth than live in fear of lies. Lucas smiled at his sister. You've got courage, little sis. I learned from the best, said Emily, looking at Sarah. An hour later, they were on the road to Boston. Mike and Sylvia had insisted on accompanying them, concerned about everyone's safety. The plan was simple. Confront Daniel with the information Lucas had discovered, while simultaneously preparing their own version of the story to make public. They arrived at the company in the middle of the morning. The Parker Engineering Building had never seemed so imposing and threatening to Sarah. For 12 years that had been her safe place, her known territory. Now she felt as if she was entering a battlefield. Ethan was in a meeting when they arrived, but his secretary informed them that he had left instructions for them to go directly to the presidential suite as soon as they arrived. When they entered, the room where everything had started weeks ago, Ethan was standing before the window, looking at the city. He turned when he heard them enter, and Sarah felt her heart accelerate. He looked tired, older, as if he had aged years in one night. How are you? He asked, his gaze lingering on Sarah before turning to Lucas and Emily. Determined, replied Lucas, and with information that could change everything. Ethan indicated the chairs in front of his desk. Tell me. Lucas spread the printed documents on the desk, explaining everything he had discovered about Daniel, about Marsha Parker, about the suspicious circumstances of her death. My God, murmured Ethan when Lucas finished. If this is true... It's true, I verified it 3 times. Lucas leaned forward. Ethan, Daniel isn't just a man resentful about having been adopted. He's a man who grew up knowing that his adoptive father possibly ordered his biological mother killed. That would explain his obsession with control and power, said Ethan slowly. If he discovered this recently... He probably wants to destroy everything Frank built, completed Sarah. The company, the family, the reputation. It's revenge. Emily, who had been quiet until then, spoke up. He's already here. Everyone turned to her. I saw his car in the parking lot when we arrived, the black BMW. As if he had been summoned, the intercom on Ethan's desk buzzed. "Mr. Ethan, your brother is here, says he has a scheduled meeting." Ethan looked at the others. "Are you ready for this?" "We are," said Sarah, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. "Send him up," Ethan said into the intercom. 5 minutes later, Daniel entered the presidential suite with the confidence of someone who believed he held all the cards. He stopped when he saw he wouldn't find Ethan alone. "What a touching family gathering," he said, but there was caution in his voice. "I was expecting a private conversation, brother." "There are no more secrets between us," said Ethan. "So, what's your final decision?" Daniel smiled, sitting in the empty chair. "Straight to the point, I like that. My decision is simple. You resign from the presidency by the end of the day, or tomorrow morning all the newspapers in Massachusetts will have a very interesting story about corporate scandals and illicit romances." "And what if I said I don't?" "Care about the newspapers?" asked Ethan. "Lies. You care about the company, you care about the family's reputation, you care about what will happen to your dear Sarah and the children when the story becomes public." "You're right," said Ethan, standing up. "I do care very much." Daniel smiled, thinking he had won. "But I'm not going to resign." Daniel's smile faltered. "Ethan, you're making a mistake." "No," interrupted Lucas, standing up too. "The one who made a mistake was you." Daniel looked at him with disdain. "And what can a New York architect do to stop me?" "This," said Lucas, throwing a folder on the desk. Daniel opened the folder and instantly paled. Inside were copies of police reports about Marcia Parker's death, crime scene photographs, testimonies from witnesses who had never been called to testify. "How did you get this?" murmured Daniel. "I have my resources," said Lucas calmly. "The question is, did you know that Frank had your mother killed?" The silence that followed was deafening. Daniel looked at the documents as if they were venomous snakes. "He didn't kill her," he finally said, his voice coming out hoarse. He just accelerated the inevitable." "Daniel," said Ethan softly, "you knew all along?" "I discovered 6 months ago. I was looking through his personal files after his death, trying to understand why I never felt part of the family, and I found it." Daniel raised his eyes, and there was genuine pain in them. "I found the payments to the dealer who gave her the final dose. I found the recorded conversations where Frank planned everything." "Why didn't you come talk to me?" asked Ethan. "Talk to you?" Daniel laughed bitterly. "The golden child, the legitimate heir. You would never have believed your saintly father was capable of murder. You're wrong. I would have believed it, and we would have dealt with it together." "Too late, brother." Emily, who had observed the entire exchange, finally spoke. "It's not too late." Everyone looked at her. "Daniel, you can choose to continue being a victim of the horrible things Frank did, or you can choose to be part of a real family." "What family?" asked Daniel, but his voice had lost its aggressiveness. "This one," said Emily, gesturing to everyone in the room. "My mom, my brother Lucas, Ethan, and you. We've all been hurt by what Frank did, but that doesn't mean we have to keep hurting each other." "Emily," said Sarah softly, proud of her daughter's wisdom. "It's true, Mom, everyone here is a victim. You were deceived about Lucas. Lucas was separated from you. Ethan grew up with a father who was a murderer. Daniel grew up knowing his mother had been killed by his adoptive father. We're all broken family trying to mend ourselves." Daniel looked at Emily as if seeing her for the first time. "And what do you propose we do with this broken family? That we stop breaking each other and start mending together?" Lucas approached Daniel. "She's right. You can destroy Ethan. You can destroy my mother. You can destroy all of us. But in the end, you'll still be alone and bitter. Or you can help us bring justice the right way. Expose Frank's crimes publicly, ensure the truth about your mother comes to light, and rebuild the company on honest foundations." "And why would I do that?" "Because," said Ethan, "I'm offering you something that Frank never offered, a real partnership, not as a subordinate employee, but as an equal partner in the company." Daniel raised his eyebrows. "Partnership?" 50% for each of us. rotating presidency, decisions made together. Ethan approached his brother. Daniel, you've always been brilliant in business, better than me in many areas. I never wanted to compete with you. I wanted to work with you. And, Sarah? Asked Daniel, looking at her. Sarah will continue working with us if she wants, but there will be no more secrets, no more lies. Ethan looked directly at Sarah. We're going to tell our story, all of it. The mistakes, the lies, the discoveries. But we'll tell it as a family that found its way back to itself. Sarah felt tears in her eyes. Ethan had chosen to trust her, support her, fight alongside her. Ethan, she began. Later, he said softly. First, let's resolve this. Daniel looked at each person in the room, then at the documents spread on the desk. If I accept, if we do this together, Frank will be exposed as a murderer. The family's reputation will be destroyed anyway. It will be rebuilt, said Lucas. On truth this time, on honesty. And you trust that I won't betray you again? No, said Ethan honestly, but we're willing to take the risk, because real family means giving second chances, third chances, as many chances as necessary. Daniel was silent for long minutes, studying each face in the room. Finally, he sighed deeply. All right, let's do this, but my way, controlled, strategic, in a way that minimizes the damage for everyone involved. What do you mean? Asked Sarah. We'll tell the story, but we'll control it. Not as sensationalist scandal, but as a family facing the mistakes of the past and choosing a better future. Emily smiled. That was exactly what I had in mind. In the weeks that followed, the story of the Parker Mitchell family became known throughout the country. But not as a destructive scandal. It was told as a narrative of redemption, forgiveness, and family reconstruction. The exclusive interview they gave to the highest-rated television program in American television showed Ethan assuming his father's mistakes, Daniel revealing his own story of abuse and overcoming, Sarah telling about the forced separation from her son, and Lucas talking about the emotional reunion with his biological family. The company not only survived the scandal, but strengthened. The transparency and honesty with which they dealt with the situation generated trust from the market and clients. Daniel, as a new equal partner, implemented social responsibility policies that transformed Parker Engineering into an ethical reference in the sector. But it was 3 months after the dramatic events that the final surprise came. Sarah was working in her new role, Human Resources Director of the restructured company, when she received a call from Lucas. Mom, you need to come to my apartment now. I have news about the paternity question. Her heart accelerated. Since the family reconciliation, the question about who was really Lucas's father had been put on the back burner, but she knew that sooner or later they would need to clarify this. She arrived at Lucas's apartment in Greenwich Village. He had decided to stay in New York, but visited Boston every 2 weeks, and found him and Ethan waiting in the living room. What happened? She asked. Lucas extended an envelope. It arrived today. By mail. No sender. Sarah opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a DNA test and a handwritten letter. Read the letter first, said Lucas. In the elegant handwriting she recognized as Frank Parker's, the letter said, Sarah, if you're reading this, it means you finally discovered that Lucas is alive, and you're probably wondering about his paternity. I left instructions for this letter to be delivered only if you ever found each other. Lucas is not my son. The DNA test I secretly ordered in 1998 proved this. He is the son of Robert Wilson, your husband at the time. But this didn't change my decision to separate you. In fact, it made everything more complicated. You see, Sarah, I fell in love with you in a way I had never experienced. It wasn't just physical attraction or an extramarital adventure. It was true, desperate, impossible love. When you got pregnant, I wanted to believe the baby was mine. I wanted it so much that I even made plans to leave my family. But when the test proved Lucas was Robert's son, I realized you would never be completely mine. There would always be a connection between you and your husband through this child. And I couldn't bear that.